tribulation. It is not afterwards, it is during your trials. Yeah, that God may be elevating you. It is during your heartbreak that God may be elevating you. It is during your disappointment that God may be elevating you. It is during your suffering that God may be elevating you. It is during your confusion that God may be elevating you. It is through your hurt and your pain that God may be elevating you. That's why you can't give up on Friday. But you got to hang in there to Sunday and see what happens. Somebody say, hang in there and see what happens. His cross has a strange attraction. For he said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw. You will not expect the cross to draw. But if he did not draw many of us, we would not be here this morning.
That's the truth.
Well, I'm real forgetting here. I said, if he did not draw many of us, we would not be here this morning. But the cross has drawn us, and we didn't even know it. Because no one comes to him except the Father draws them. And it was God who started it all. He flirted with us, and the Lord drew us. He was like a magnet that drew us out of what we were in. We were stuck in some stuff, but he drew us. Like a magnet, something in us responded to something in him. It's an attractive draw. This word draw means to pull without force. He draws us through love. He draws us through his joy. He draws us with his peace. And he draws us because truth will always rise up. They took truth, stood him before Pilate. Pilate told him that I find no fault in this man. Jesus never said a word. They took truth. Pilate washed his hands and he handed him over to their guards. The Bible says that they took his clothes off of him and they put a purple robe on his back. They began to mock him. They began to bow down to him, call him the King of the Jews. They spat on him. I said they spat on truth. Because all Jesus had ever done was truth. All he ever stood on was truth. All he ever did for those he encountered was truth. But they punished truth. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They made him suffer. They beat him until blood ran out of his body. They beat him until the Bible says blood fell from his face like great drops of water. And they beat him because God had ordained it. The Jews may have orchestrated it, but God ordained it. They took him up a long hill to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of a skull. They nailed him to a cross. They nailed his hands and they nailed his feet. They hung him there on a cross. Truth hung there and suffered. From the 9 o'clock hour till the 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he hung there and suffered. They took a spear and pushed it in his side until blood and water ran out of his side. They took bitter mirth and vinegar, put it on his lips to try to make him drink it, and they mocked him and they teased him and they talked about him and they mocked him some more. But he hung there and never said a word. And finally, he spoke and says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And truth hung there on the cross. I heard the old prophet Isaiah pick up the story and say, somewhere in the portals of heaven, as God watched his son suffer there on that cross, when he locked his head in the locks of his shoulders, when he dropped his head into the locks of his shoulders and declared that it is finished, they took him down off the cross, buried him in Joseph's tomb. And that's what they did with Truth. They hung Truth there until they took Truth down off the cross. Took Truth and buried him, not in his own tomb, but they buried him in a borrowed tomb. And they laid him there all night Friday. Sometimes Saturday morning, they tell me that Pilate's guards come back to Pilate and say, we need to seal up the tomb before one of the disciples declare that he has risen. We got to lock him up in there just so that he don't get out, because if he comes out, he'll be greater than he was when he walked the street. So they had Truth locked behind a stone in a sepulchre. But the Bible says that Isaiah prophesied that God somewhere in the portals of heaven, as he watched his son lay there in the tomb, the Bible says that God stood up in heaven and began to get dressed, because truth will always rise up. Can you see it? God the Father standing in heaven, his son laying in a tomb on Friday night. The Bible says that God himself began to get dressed. What did he put on, Brother Preacher? The Bible said that he put on righteousness as a breastplate. He put on salvation as a helmet. He put on vengeance as a garment for his clothes. And he used zeal that he found within himself to dress himself as a coat. He got dressed because he was displeased that the church had turned a blind eye. He was displeased that the church had been given over to what he had declared as immoral, and truth was not being defended. I think that's part of our problem, that there is no truth no more. There are no absolutes no more. What used to be, it used to be what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. But now church folk will tell you, what I say is right, and what I say is wrong, is wrong. And God got fed up with it. And the Bible says that he stood up in heaven, began to put on his clothes, put on righteousness, put on vengeance, put on zeal, and got dressed because truth was not being defended. He was displeased because the church had got too quiet. So therefore, with his own arms, he would bring deliverance of his own power, of his own integrity. God said that I will defend truth. So inside of the sepulchre, Jesus got up off the stone tomb, say yes, got dressed. The preacher this morning said that when they laid him in there, they had beat him so bad that you couldn't recognize him. But over in the night, on Saturday night, he got up off that tomb, got dressed in new clothes. And the Bible says when they saw him, his hair shined like gold. Say yes, his appearance was like raiment, and he lit up like a light. Say yes, because truth will always rise up, and God realized that whenever truth is crushed to the ground, it will rise up again. So God decided to send the Redeemer back to Zion. Out of the shadows of glory came one who looked like the truth. Say yes. Out of the darkness, out of despair, came one who declared himself that I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No man come to the Father but by me. For I heard the apostle say that if God be for you, he's more than the world against you. And when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. And when the Redeemer came, they thought they had killed him on Friday. Thought they had sent him to hell on Saturday. Matter of fact, the Bible says that he went to hell. But he didn't go for nothing. Because you remember he says, I am the way. I am the truth. And they overlooked it when he says, I am the life. So when life began to walk amongst death, the Bible said dead folks start getting up. I wish I had some Bible readers in here. They said on Saturday, dead folks start getting up out the grave and walking through the streets of Jerusalem. Because life was walking through the portals of hell. The old preachers used to say that the devil started screaming to his imps and say, close the door because he's coming, because I can hear him walking through the pits of hell. They said, lock the door, he's about to get loose. And Jesus walked up to the devil, took the keys of death, hell, and the grave. And on Sunday he got up and said, I got all power in my hand. Say yes, say yes, say yes. Because truth will always rise up. And when they asked him, what do you say to these things? He said, if you destroy this body. Matter of fact, he said, if you destroy this temple, 3 days I'll raise it back up. They didn't understand it because they thought he was talking about the temple in Jerusalem. But he was referring to his body. Because resurrection is about a bodily resurrection. It ain't about just his spirit. When you and I die, our body will go back to the dust, but our spirit will meet him in the air. Jesus is the only one that when he died, his body got up. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what the resurrection is. That when he died and they laid him there over in the night on Saturday, he got up. And on Sunday morning, when the women got there, on the way they asked each other, how shall we roll the stone away? But when they got there was an angel sitting on the stone. The Bible said his face shine like light. And he basically said what the song says, don't cry. Dry your eyes. He's not dead. He is risen. Come on and give God praise. Because truth will always